A June 11th edition of the WSJM Morning Show. I'm Ken Lundberg, and my special guest this morning is John Egelhaaf. Am I getting that right, John Egelhaaf?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, you bet. Executive Director of the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. Good morning and welcome to the WSJM studios.
Well, thank you. It's Ken and Friends, right?
Ken and Friends.
So
You're my friend.
Wow, it was so easy.
Thank you for being my friend.
Yeah, that's right.
Did Peter put you up to that?
No, all I had to do was walk in the door.
Okay.
It's a lot easier than I thought.
No, it's great. A listener, a frequent listener to the show, suggested a guest, and I invite anyone to suggest guests for the WSJM Morning Show. The Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. We have your organization on the news quite a bit because you're involved in a lot of things that a lot of the different municipalities are involved in around here. And so, what I was hoping for today's show, and it looks like you're well prepared for this, is to talk about what the organization is. What you're up to, some of the things. And I was excited to see that you're actually working on some AI policy issues. Mm-hmm. I did not expect that from the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission.
Yeah, we try to look toward the horizon all the time and think about what issues local government might have that we can help with. And AI is clearly one of those topics.
What kind of questions do the municipalities come to you with about AI?
Well, it's not always the way you might think. It's not as if we wait for prompting from the locals. We try to look out ahead and say, they may not be thinking about this, but if we're thinking about it and we know it's coming in the next maybe half year, 2 years, let's get out ahead of it. Let's be ready when they start thinking they're going to need help with it. So that's kind of where we are with AI right now.
I'm fascinated with AI, artificial intelligence. I'm assuming you play around with it a bit, or you use it. How are you using AI?
Well, so far we've been using it primarily as editorial assistance, and I have a tendency I love to write, but I'm also a little too wordy.
Okay.
So sometimes it's a really great assistant when you're writing grant applications, because oftentimes they have word limits.
Okay.
And so I'll write the great American novel and it'll be, way too wordy. And I'll say, hey, listen, AI, I need to say this, but I need it to be this many words or fewer. And AI can help with that.
That is a great application. That is a great application. In fact, we're testing it out in the newsroom as well. And doing exactly the same thing of, okay, I have this article, but I need it to be in 200, 300, 400 words. What do you got for me? And AI comes back many times with a really good suggestion.
I have not oftentimes, but I have had the experience more than once of building something that I really like and saying, can you do better? And looking at the two together and saying, I was still better before you took over AI. So I'm using mine. So it's, it always, I think those of us who use it and know what's behind it understand that you don't always want to adopt it. One, and two, the content you put in is really important.
Yes.
So you can't rely on AI to always give you back truthful content. So if you apply to truthful content and it just resorts what you've put in, that's not a bad use of AI.
Yeah. Garbage in, garbage out. High quality in, high quality, hopefully out.
Yes, but our AI work in the future is way more expansive than what I just talked about. So it's a lot about process and policy and the way it's used and the kind of content that goes into it and what should and should not ever go into AI.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you'd want, I'd love to talk some more about this, but I know you do a million other things at the commission. So we'll be talking about that with John Egelhaaf, Executive Director of the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. That's coming up after news right here on the WSJM Morning Show.
Soon as tomorrow.
When you need extra cash, go to 27cash.com. That's 27cash.com. 27cash.com.
WSJM News now.
Team coverage from the WSJM newsroom on News Talk Sports 94.9 WSJM.
7:05, it's the WSJM Morning Show. Good morning, Wednesday, June 11th. I'm Ken Lundberg, and the morning show continues. We've got news coming up in just a moment, also our weather forecast. We have our guest this hour, John Egelhaaf. He's the executive director of the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. He's been there since 2003, and so we're going to talk all about what the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission is about, what they do, what they're up to right now, and what's ahead in the future. In fact, if you're on the video live stream, you've already got a taste of that because they're thinking about some of the questions that they're starting to receive or will receive soon from municipalities in regards to AI. So, I mean, a million different things that we could touch on today, but we'll talk with John in just a few moments right here on the WSJM Morning Show. Mostly sunny skies as we begin our day on our Wednesday. It's 61 degrees in Benton Harbor, 63 in St. Joseph, South Haven, 61 degrees. We're looking at a high, by the lakeshore, 77 degrees. St. Joseph, that's your high today predicted. 81 degrees predicted as a high in Benton Harbor. 76 predicted as a high in South Haven. Over in Dowagiac, they're going to get warmer, probably around 84 degrees. But overall, it's going to be a mostly sunny day in Southwest Michigan. Winds are going to kick up out of the southwest, maybe gusting to 25 miles per hour. Tonight's forecast, partly cloudy, a low of 65 or lower in, lakeshore areas. Southwest winds 5 to 10 miles per hour. Thursday's forecast, partly cloudy, a 20% chance of showers and a high around 85 degrees. As we look toward the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, looks like we have partly sunny on Friday, a high around 80. Saturday, mostly cloudy, a chance of showers and storms, high around 78. And Sunday, partly sunny, a high around 77 degrees. Some of the news that we're following from the WSJM newsroom this morning, there's an air quality advisory in effect in our region today due to high ozone levels. The Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, EGLE, says pollutants in our area are expected to be in the unhealthy for sensitive groups range. That advisory covers Allegan, Berrien, Kent, Muskegon, Ottawa, and Van Buren counties. They say winds shifting to a more southwestern direction will help increase our temperatures today, but the wind direction will also increase ozone development in Southwest Michigan, especially along the lakeshore. And so some residual smoke within the atmosphere might also help produce some ozone in the impacted areas. So people with lung disease, asthma, children and teens, older adults, people with cardiovascular issues, anyone who's routinely outdoors and active for more than 6 hours a day, you're advised to reduce your exposure and maybe choose some less strenuous activities or shortening the amount of time that you're active outdoors. As far as everyone else is concerned, go out, enjoy your outdoor activities. Other news, the Van Buren County Sheriff's Department is warning once again the public of the latest phone scam. This popped up. We heard from Michigan State Police earlier in the week. Last week, we heard from the Berrien County Sheriff's Department. This week, Van Buren County Sheriff Dan Abbott says residents have reported receiving text messages asking them to pay unpaid fines. The message contains a link that you can do so, but don't click that link. Don't do it. The message states in part, Michigan State Department of Vehicles final notice, enforcement penalties begin on June 11. It then tells the recipient they'll face various penalties for not responding. Sheriff Abbott says this is a scam. He says be wary of any unsolicited text messages asking for payment via phone or via text. Don't click the links included in those messages and don't provide any personal information to the senders of those silly texts. The Abbott says the text messages are being received by Van Buren County residents as part of the latest scam coming from various phone numbers. They haven't pinpointed it. Other news, the summer season of the South Haven Performance Series begins this month with a concert by Majestic Brass of Grand Rapids. WSJM's Andrew Green has this report.
South Haven Performance Series President Robert Lindstrom tells us Majestic Brass is an octet featuring some of the finest players in West Michigan. He says the group's performance will showcase the rich tradition of brass chamber music, and the June 20th concert will be the first performance of the Majestic Brass on the Lakeshore. The engagement will be held at Peace Evangelical Lutheran Church in South Haven on the 20th, starting at 7 p.m., and tickets will be available at the door for $15. There will be 3 additional concerts with the South Haven Performance Series this year, 2 this summer and 1 in December. Up next will be the Burdick Thorn String Quartet at the First United Methodist Church on July 18th. We have a link to more information at our website. Andrew Green, WSJM News.
Set for this Saturday is a taste of Buchanan, a chance for people to take in downtown Buchanan and check out some of the dining options that are available. Buchanan City Manager Tony McGee tells us they've had a restaurant week before, but this is the first time they've had a Taste of Buchanan event. The restaurants themselves suggested it as a way of getting more people to come downtown while their major construction project continues.
Even though we have detour routes that can get people there, and we thought this was just a great opportunity to support those local downtown restaurants and show people that it's still easy to get downtown. It's accessible. You can still park and just walk a few feet to get some of your favorite restaurants and shops.
15 restaurants and shops are sponsoring a Taste of Buchanan. The event will take place at the same time as the Jazz and Blues Festival, so McGee says there'll be all kinds of things to do.
There'll be music going on here for a significant part of the day. Our farmers market starts in the morning, goes all day. So it's a great opportunity to come down, see some live music, get some of the great fruits and vegetables we have here in Southwest Michigan, and visit some of our great downtown restaurants and businesses we have there, show them some support.
Some restaurants are holding special hours for the day so they can be open for all the extra visitors. McGee says whether you're craving coffee, breakfast, lunch, dinner, or a sweet treat, downtown Buchanan this weekend will have you covered. He invites everyone out for the first ever Taste of Buchanan. You might build in a couple extra minutes because there's a lot of road construction going on in that area. You may have a detour or two to deal with. That's some of the news that we're looking at this morning in the WSJM newsroom. We've got more to talk about. We have sports with Dave Wolf in just a moment. First off, I want to introduce our guest for this hour here on the WSJM Morning Show. It's John Egelhaaf, the Executive Director of the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. Good morning, John, and thanks for coming into the studios today.
Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things before we get into the meat of the interview about what Southwest Michigan Planning Commission is we love to introduce folks and have them introduce themselves and tell us who they are, what they're about, kind of your origin story. We know the commission. We talk about it a lot in the news. There are a lot of great people that are working at the commission. But who is John Egelhaaf?
I'm a guy that came to planning, not in a direct way, I suppose.
Okay.
I grew up in west suburbs of Chicago, went to university at Purdue, got an English political science degree, thought I was going to go to law school, did, and realized that lawyering is different from what I had imagined.
Didn't want to do it, huh?
Well, it turned out it's kind of like law schools are sort of like they're turning out plumbers, forgive me if you're an attorney.
You got to explain that one.
Well, it just feels like there's a certain way to do it.
Okay.
And I thought it was a creative exercise. I like to write. I like to think on my feet. It felt less creative to me and more like they're stamping out, here's how you do this, and here's the way you do that, and here's how you write, and all that. And I wanted to go in a different direction.
Not a lot of room to feed that creativity.
No. So the next step for me was a master's degree in landscape architecture, which is at the University of Massachusetts. It is in the Department of Regional Planning. And landscape architecture isn't necessarily just garden design. It's a much broader and more extensive exploration of the holding capacity of land and interconnection of natural and man-made gray and green infrastructure, all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So after getting a master's, then I moved into planning and came to Southwest Michigan after almost 7 years as the county planner in Clinton County, Indiana. Wow. So I was in north central Indiana, just kind of a bit east of Purdue's campus, kind of over there that way.
Yeah.
And then this opportunity opened up.
How, if I can ask, and then we'll get sports here in just a moment, but to go from I'm going to be a lawyer to I'm going to go into planning, where was the pivot point? I mean, you identified maybe being an attorney wasn't for you. How did you get the insight to, well, maybe planning is?
I think it was some of that helpful stuff that happens when you do these kinds of career surveys. What am I good at? What am I normally sort of a natural place for a person with this combination of talents and interests? And it showed up as one of the options. So I just kind of went with it. It was in that moment where the world is possible for you, and you just sort of like, well, okay, I think that's going to work for me. Let's have a try at that. And there's quite a range of diverse options in planning and landscape architecture. So I could have gone in a lot of different directions.
You glad you made the choice?
Oh yeah, it's been an amazing. It's a great place to be. I love being here specifically, but the career itself has been incredibly rewarding.
We'll talk more about that with John Egelhaaf. Thank you for answering that. Executive Director of the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. He's been with the commission since 2003, so we'll talk about what the commission's up to these days, what they have ahead, and more, what's been happening in our region in Southwest Michigan. That's coming up right here on the WSJM Morning Show. We'll start that conversation right now on the video live stream. If you have the WSJM app, you can watch it. Tune in and watch the video right now. Otherwise, we'll be back on the radio here after sports and a couple of messages. It's WSJM. Okay. WSJM Morning Show continues on the video live stream. Bernice Mason says, good morning, Ken and friends. Hey, thanks, Bernice. Appreciate you. Welcome, John, she says. We appreciate you, Bernice. It's been a while since we've seen you. So the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission, is it true? Well, before we get there, you mentioned something about the interaction between green and gray, natural and unnatural. Do cities sink from the weight of the buildings?
No, because
I've seen this on the internet, so it must be true.
Well, it depends on what city you're talking about. There's all kinds of stuff going on under the surface, right?
Okay.
And typically when we build, we're going down to bedrock and anchoring into bedrock. So
and bedrock, for the layman, that's the foundation, right? It's pretty solid,
right? And even homeowners know this. Typically, when you build below frost line. So we may not be going down to bedrock when we build a house, but we're building foundations down below frost line so that as freeze thaw happens, you're not disrupting what happens on the surface.
Right, because you're looking for as much stability as you can get.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So cities don't sink under the weight of buildings.
The cities that are built properly, let's put it that way.
Caveat. Tell us, what's the mission of the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission?
I'll be really specific and give you exactly what the mission is. Okay. Our team uses its passion and expertise to connect people, assist communities, and advance cooperative solutions to regional challenges, right? Sort of cross-jurisdictional challenges oftentimes experienced by the communities that created us. So we were created by the 3 counties of Southwest Michigan, Berrien, Cass, Van Buren counties.
Okay.
We exist because they wanted us to exist. There was enabling legislation at the state level that said, if you want this, locals, you can have it. And we've constructed 14 of these planning regions. We've built these geographies across the state that if you want to have a regional planning organization, hey, in Southwest Michigan, it'll be these 3 counties, and you can choose to work together and do that. And the 3 counties stepped up and all passed resolutions, agreed to create us.
Okay.
So the beauty of the concept behind the regional planning organizations is there's a bunch of issues that local jurisdictions probably share. And we can get back to the green and gray infrastructure thing, because right off the bat, there are elements of the green infrastructure. There are there are the Paw Paw River, the Black River, the Dowagiac. These are natural systems that transcend jurisdictional boundaries.
Yep.
So a regional planning organization is the perfect entity to sort of go, okay, you all share these common interests and the health of this resource. Let's work together to try to, maintain it. And that's just a small, water quality is just one small element of what the Planning Commission likes to focus on. But there's lots of others, and things like recreation planning, master planning. Oftentimes, multiple jurisdictions will want to plan together because they are very connected. The people that live there don't really care if they're crossing over a jurisdictional boundary when it comes to going from one place to another. And so, a lot of these common entities, common issues, we help communities work through.
Okay, we'll continue this conversation in just a moment. It's 7:20, Wednesday, June 11th. We're talking with John Egelhaaf, Executive Director of the Southwest Planning Commission. We'll continue that conversation in just a moment.
Clouds, still temperatures in the low 80s with a chance of rain. I'm Chief Meteorologist Carrie Peugeot.
The Morning Show with Ken and Friends on 94.9 WSJM.
7:20, it's the WSJM Morning Show for your Wednesday, June 11th. June 11th already. Doesn't it seem like we were just in January last week?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously the temperature might have felt like that a couple of times, but not too bad. Good morning. It's the WSJM Morning Show. I'm Ken Lundberg. My special guest this morning is John Egelhaaf. He's the Executive Director of the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. And if you've been listening on the video live stream, we've understood a little bit more about who John is, how he chose the career for planning. And now we're just digging into the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission itself. It was allowed to be created. The state enacted legislation that allowed it to be created. Berrien, Van Buren, and Cass counties decided, yes, this would be a good thing. And so tell us just again in a nutshell, what does the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission do?
Yeah. So I think that it's an easy sort of entry point to know that when it comes to master planning, recreation planning, this is a thing that communities often do to build a roadmap for where they want to get to in the future. So they will establish goals and objectives. And what does that look like on the ground? And that process of working through what a community's goals and objectives might be. What's their vision for the future? How do they want to evolve and progress into the future? Having professionals walk them through that process, get their constituents engaged and involved in it, make sure that it's a collective decision about, who they are, what they want to be. We can help them through that entire process and then turn out documentation that says they want to do this in year 1, year 2, year 3. So build out a roadmap essentially for how to get from where you are to where you want to be, what that looks like, who they should be engaged with in order to make that happen, what a map of their community looks like today, and what it can look like in the future. All of that stuff, we walk the communities through that.
Is it safe to say that you're the subject matter experts for municipalities, that they have a lot to deal with, everything from garbage pickup to planning for parks to making sure that the stray dog is picked up? They've got a lot on their minds, a lot to deal with. But as they put their master plans together, whether they're seeking state or federal money or something along those lines, they have an idea. Okay, we want a park. We think a park would be a great thing. They come to you and ask you, okay, if we wanted to do this, what would be necessary?
Yeah, and think about it in terms of it's a land use issue. Like the stuff that we deal with almost, well, not exclusively, but and in master plan in particular, it's about land use.
Okay.
So whether or not there are lots of departments within local government that don't necessarily have to do with land use. Garbage pickup is not necessarily. But when you're thinking about the way you want to zone in the future, like how does your zoning look and what it looks like now and what that zoning will turn your community into, does that match with your present goals and objectives? If it doesn't, and you want to rezone and rethink, and that can have to do with recreation planning as well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of times where communities will separately plan their recreation planning and their master planning because they're not always coincident in time. The state requires a new recreation plan every 5 years. Master planning similarly has a sort of cadence that it runs on. And in order to be eligible for grant funding, you're supposed to have a viable master plan, a viable recreation plan. So if it exceeds the time constraint that a plan is legitimately recognized under, then the state says, well, you're not eligible because you don't have a plan that works. So that sounds like I'm describing everything that the Planning Commission does. It's one kind of fiber of this larger fabric of what the Planning Commission does. And we could, talk for a long time about the whole range of things we do. But I thought that's a good entry point, maybe for folks to understand us a little better.
Is that planning piece and helping the municipality? Do municipalities always listen to you?
Well, we listen to them.
Okay.
The point, the bedrock of everything we do is public engagement. So we never walk in and say, here's what you need to do, or this is what's going on in the world. You need to do this. We never do that. What we are is a sort of a multi-tool organization, a multi-tool bunch of professionals who can walk into a community, listen carefully to what they're talking about, orchestrate conversations so it goes in areas that we can help them with. And then we think about our resources as professionals and say, they want to do this. What's a realistic manifestation of that thing they want to do? And help them through what that, documenting that and putting it in a map and, all that kind of stuff.
Moving forward. Okay. We're talking with John Egelhaaf. He's the executive director of the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. And we're learning more about him, about what the Planning Commission does. What are some of the projects that you're involved in right now?
I think I want to tell you at some point when you have room for this, tell you a little story about how Napier Avenue changed the way it looks to what it looks like today.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
We can do it right now.
All right. So it was, I think a lot of folks remember it hasn't been that long since Napier was reconstructed.
Okay.
There was a time when that road was, we are very involved at the Planning Commission in helping communities through identifying priority road projects and getting those projects funded, getting them documented, and then, flipping the switch and having the projects then happen. So there's a lot of road projects out there that we have walked communities through the process of getting it on the map for the state and the feds and getting them funded. Well, Napier was in that sort of category of things. It was time for it to be reconstructed. And we do a lot of data collection. We're really high-end data collection. We do high-end digital GIS mapping. If people know what GIS is, it's like a custom mapping, digital mapping opportunity. We know about the people that live in and around Napier Avenue. We know that there are, in some areas, more than 30% of the homeowners do not have a vehicle. They don't have access to a vehicle. We know that a lot of them need to use public transit. We know that people had died along Napier Avenue as pedestrians because there were no sidewalks. There was not a provision for sort of multimodal travel on Napier, which means something other than a car. So if you're walking, if you're riding a bike, if you want to use a bus, Napier was not your place to be. It was dangerous. So we went to the communities.
Time frame that we're talking about here.
You mean from
what year?
When Napier was being considered for reconstruction. It was a multi-year project. It's probably been 5 years now, maybe. Okay. So anyway, we went to the communities and we said, listen, we know this about your constituency. Here is the data about the dangers of Napier as it's constructed presently. We think there's a better way. And here's a option for how we can reconsider this. We got funding to have a professional engineering company come and study the road, study the geographic dynamics of it. Where's the edge to edge right of way? Yeah. How much room do we have? What are the issues with changing the way it's constructed? They helped us suggest back to the communities, here's how the road could be redesigned. Ultimately, you got where you are today. No, people haven't died anymore. People don't die on Napier because they're riding a bike or walking at night. Traffic still moves at a good rate, even though you'll notice it's not, 4 lanes plus the central turn lane anymore.
Right.
All of these sort of progressive approaches to the way infrastructure is built we're very actively interested and involved in trying to push the envelope toward a better way.
Yeah, and one of those projects was the sidewalk, as you mentioned, and it comes up part of Napier Avenue, but doesn't go the full length of Napier Avenue. Is that where some of the planning runs into some of the realities of municipal governments?
It does to some extent. It also, the way the right-of-way, what the right-of-way will allow you to do, that's sometimes the issue too, is you simply don't have enough land to do everything you want to do.
Yeah.
But I got to say that what we saw with Napier was a real lesson in courage by the elected officials as well, because they had to step off into the unknown a little bit. A lot of them rightly are concerned about snow removal.
Sure.
And so sidewalks, when you build them, you have an obligation legally to make sure that people don't fall and hurt themselves.
Right.
And you know, how do you remove the snow? What sort of
Shovels.
obligation are you introducing into yourself?
Yeah.
But, yes.
People.
But you know, you get into the whole legal issue, and that wasn't there before, and you are
Introducing it. Sure.
So, you know, it's a lesson in courage too, and really progressive leadership and what that looks like.
No, thank you for that example. I appreciate you walking through that. And we'll look for more on what you're working on now and some of the things in the future. And we'll get back to that AI discussion, because you know I love a good AI discussion. So that's happening right here on the WSJM Morning Show. It's 7:31, and we will get back with Bloomberg, our Market Minute, in just a moment. Also, the latest world and national news from ABC, our local news preview, and more conversation with John Egelhaaf. He's the executive director of the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. It's happening right here on the WSJM Morning Show.
What would you call a...
Okay, back on the video live stream. We doing all right? Is this good?
Yeah.
Okay. It's an interesting. I'm glad you brought up that case study of Napier Avenue, because we're seeing, I think the term is road diet. And I don't know if that was technically a road diet, but you went from 4 lanes down to 1 lane each direction and a center turn lane, and there's no traffic backup. It seems just fine. People were worried about, oh, well, if you take it down 4 lanes to 2 lanes, we're going to have traffic backups. It's going to be horrible. And in fact, one of the employees here in Southwest at Midwest Family Marketing and Media, when it was still 4 lanes, they were waiting to take a left into here and got smacked. They I don't know what happened exactly, but they got into a car accident. Now that they have that left turn lane, it doesn't happen anymore, which is great.
Yeah, I can remember the old configuration and how traffic would back up behind the left turners. It was dangerous. I mean, that just as in the way that vehicles move on the new configuration takes that away.
Yeah.
It is hard. The road diet thing, those are sort of trigger words for some people.
Really?
It seems like you're taking something away from them. And that is a big deal. And rightly, people should be skeptical about it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I love the way engineering and planning have gotten together over the last decade or so on this.
How so?
Well, I think in the past, vehicular travel was the exclusive place where engineers lived, and planners weren't really invited. Since then, there has been a really nice evolution where planning can be very influential in helping engineers define what the problem looks like. And it's not just about moving vehicles as fast as you can through a corridor.
Right.
It used to be, you know, you design a road like we had at Napier, which was 4 lanes, and it was basically designing a road like a shotgun, and just saying, just move through it like a bullet. And that is not the answer for the rest of the users of that corridor.
Yeah.
So, you know, with planners involved, we can tell engineers, we know what the characteristics of the users look like. We know there are some users who are being left out of the equation and shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And you know, these are the problems we want engineers to help us solve.
Yeah.
And you know, together you get something creative and forward thinking and envelope pushing, and that's what this looks like.
I'm overjoyed to hear that perspective and respect it greatly, because I lived out in Seattle for a period of time. And I used to sit in traffic on I-5, the interstate that goes basically from Canada to Mexico. It's a big interstate that goes that direction. And you'd sit in traffic every day without fail for 2 hours to go 20 miles. And part of it, as it was explained to me, was, well, when it was designed, the interstate was made to get people from point A to point B as fast as possible. But then you needed to go to suburbs, you needed to go to housing developments and that kind of thing. So they built these exits. Sometimes you had to get off or get on over here on the right side, and within a quarter mile get off on the left side. Meanwhile, you've got the shotgun blast of vehicles moving this way, and it just ends up in a traffic jam every single day. And so having the diverse points of view, the perspectives, I think it's great.
Yeah.
So-
I mean, it looks really good from the planner's perspective because, you think to yourself, gosh, if we'd been involved at the beginning,
right?
And that presumes a lot. I mean, things change a lot
Sure.
over the decades and centuries, right? And
Right.
the way people,
Absolutely.
the kind of vehicles we all drive, and
Cars go faster. Sometimes they don't even have a driver anymore.
Yeah, that's right. And the desires we have as motorists, and people change over time.
Yeah.
You don't get to know that all, but the idea behind planners being forward thinking and try to imagine the future. That's another place where we can help engineers. We foresee the following progression over time, and let's design for that.
I love engineers too. Don't get me wrong. Love engineers. They're the ones that make it work. So we appreciate that. All right.
Solving problems.
Back with John Egelhaaf, Executive Director of the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission, in just a moment. We've got the latest from Bloomberg happening right now. We'll get our local news, a preview in that. We'll also have an update from ABC coming up right here on WSJM.
Wall Street with gains ranging from 0.25% to around 0.2% The U.S. and China capped 2 days of high-stakes trade talks with a plan to revive the flow of sensitive goods, a framework now awaiting the blessing of President Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping. Only about 20% of Starbucks U.S. locations have an assistant manager, and the roles tend to be short-term, but that is about to change. The company says it's planning to add at least one full-time assistant manager to most of its company-operated U.S. stores. The move is aimed at helping store managers focus more on tasks like managing schedules and recruiting. Stock futures are slipping on this Wednesday morning. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
The Morning Show with Ken Lundberg on WSJM.
7:37, the WSJM Morning Show continues on your Wednesday, June 11th. Thank you for joining us. We know you have a choice. We make it easy. You've got WSJM on the radio, where we're here on Facebook and YouTube live streaming right now. We also have it on our WSJM Smart app. Just go to your app store of choice, whether that's Android or Apple. Download the WSJM app. You get weather, you get news, you get sports, you get our podcasts. That's news on demand, basically. Any kind of content that we put up there on demand, so it's on your schedule, and our video live stream as well. So anyway, we do have more coming up in just a moment. Our conversation with John Egelhaaf, Executive Director of the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission, continues in just a moment. We're going to go through a lot of the things that they're working on here in just a few minutes. First off, forecast for today, mostly sunny skies. In the warmest parts of Southwest Michigan, we're going to get into the mid to upper 80s today. I'm high around 87 degrees, probably closer to 77 degrees by the lakeshore. Winds out of the southwest, keeping us cool, 10 to 15 miles per hour, gusting to 25. Tonight's forecast, partly cloudy, a low around 65. And Thursday, tomorrow, partly cloudy, introducing a 20% chance of rain showers tomorrow. The high will still be very warm in the lower to mid 80s, with southwest winds 10 to 15 miles per hour. It's 7:38. We've got news coming up from ABC right now. A local news preview next.
ABC News, I'm Sherry Preston. Curfew in effect for a mile-square area of downtown Los Angeles following days of protests against ICE raids in restaurants, businesses, and at immigration hearings where migrants who show up for regular check-ins are being rounded up. ABC's Jim Ryan with more on another place that's happening.
In San Antonio, agents on Tuesday escorted migrants walking out of their scheduled immigration hearings onto a bus and led them away. Protester Kat Uraka notes that the ICE officials covered their faces and removed their ID badges.
If you didn't know you were doing wrong, you wouldn't be wearing a mask. You wouldn't have taken off your name tag. You'd be proud of the work you were doing.
The group escorted onto a bus Tuesday included several men, a woman, and a child. Jim Ryan, ABC News.
President Trump is warning against any protests at the big military parade in Washington, D.C. this weekend. It's being held to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the founding of the U.S. Army and just happens to fall on the president's 79th birthday. This is ABC News.
WSJM News Now. Team coverage from the WSJM Newsroom on News Talk Sports 94.9 WSJM.
7:39, the WSJM Morning Show continues. I'm Ken Lundberg. Some of the news that we'll bring to you at 8 o'clock this morning. Just one day into the suspension of the paid parking program in downtown St. Joseph, and a rush of people returned to the downtown area. I have to tell you, I saw it with my own two eyes. And I'm interested if the Planning Commission has any thoughts on parking and what that does with the community. Maybe we'll ask in a moment. But I did see a burst of activity. It was noted on State Street yesterday, just after a day after the city announced a pause in paid parking enforcement until they can confirm their pay stations are ADA compliant. So we'll talk about that. That's coming up at 8 o'clock this morning. Also, the project to construct a new 200-unit apartment complex at the site of the former Snowflake Motel in Lincoln Township has taken another step forward. We'll tell you what's happened on that. And then contractors and city officials still hoping dredging will begin this week in South Haven. They had some choppy waves up there that prevented them from getting underway on schedule. So we'll talk about that and more coming up at 8 o'clock this morning. It's 7:41. We've got sports with Dave Wolf coming up after a look at state news.
The Michigan News.
Back on the video live stream, we're talking with John Egelhaaf. He is with the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. Thanks for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. You brought in some notes this morning of all the things you're working on, and there's a ton. There's a ton of things that you're working on. You want to run through some of these things?
Sure. All of them deserve more than a very brief skip across the surface, but I'm in no particular order. We're working as a kind of we often do this. We work to help the state carry through initiatives that they have for locals. And materials management is a new thing. Solid waste management used to be the way things worked, where communities picked up trash, sent them off to the landfill, end of story. The state wants us to pull that trash stream apart and start using the different strands of that in more creative ways.
So you're talking about, like, we refer to it when I was at Whirlpool as critical materials management.
That's exactly.
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So we're building a regional plan for the 3 counties on how to manage the waste stream for materials management.
What's that issue look like right now?
It looks like building something out of nearly nothing.
Okay.
Recycling is challenging. Organics and the way we manage organics just isn't happening at all. So composting for yard waste and food waste is a thing. It's building materials, reuse of building materials. We need to do better. And we simply don't have the infrastructure right now. We're going to have to build the infrastructure and build in all the systems to make it work.
And what's the goal if you have such an infrastructure in place?
Well, the state has a very specific goal about reducing the amount of recyclables that go into the landfilling.
Okay.
So that number is something we're all shooting at, but it's a very broad number. And interestingly, the way that number is comprised right now is a little hard to pin down.
Okay.
So
great.
So that
not surprising though from state government.
Yes, but we have talked about AI helping us with it. So
okay.
That's an interesting AI.
All right. So materials management. We talked a little bit already about the ethical AI policy. What does that entail?
Well, it's us at the very smallest level. It's us at the Planning Commission building ourselves a policy where we can be sure that we're using AI in an ethical way. But we're taking that methodology and saying, when we're done building that methodology and deriving a policy from it, we will share that process with local units of government if they want to go through it in the same way we did, to generate their own ethical AI policy.
What would an example of an ethical or unethical use of AI be?
I think it's one example of that would be, how do we prevent sensitive information from getting into AI? Because AI just is machine learning, right? So you put something into it and it uses that information in deriving answers to other questions. if you put people's sensitive medical information, legal information, all sorts of different, stuff that shouldn't be in the public realm,
Right.
you put it into AI and suddenly you lose control over it. So there's a real need to be able to define the kind of data that you put into AI to ask AI back to help you with answers.
On one side of that, I definitely see the point about privacy. I don't want my information out there. I'm raised as a very private person. On the other hand, the more information anonymized that will help in a planning decision. Don't you want that?
That's a critical definition there, and I agree with you. We anonymize a lot of data. So we take the, let's say, geographic specificity, the human specificity out of it and say, broadly speaking, the population looks like this and has these characteristics. Given that, what can we learn from it?
Got it. Okay.
So you're
so setting
exactly
that
right.
boundary.
Yes, very well said.
Okay. Trail development.
We are very instrumental in a lot of and when you think about what I have said previously about cross-jurisdictional developments and stuff, previously, when people thought about trails, they would think about, we need a trail in Buchanan, or we need a trail in New Buffalo. But the ability to connect the New Buffalo trail to another trail that's been built was really not very good.
Okay.
We have since gotten very involved in the interconnection of trails into systems.
Yeah.
The development of water trails, navigable, paddleable water trails like the Paw Paw River, 62 miles of continuous paddleable water trail.
Wow.
Signed, all sorts of great stuff, mapped, available online for people who want to come in, bring their kayak or whatever, and put in one place, take out in another. That's all been documented, and we help the communities along there manage that trail. So
love that.
A lot of hard stuff.
Yeah, especially, I mean, if you think I don't know about the water piece, but about the land piece, if you've ever been on a trail and it just terminates.
Frustrating.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's like, well, I'm ready to go. Why can't that county get its stuff in order?
I'm an avid cyclist, so I know that one too,
Okay.
having to figure your way through that.
Let's see. Southwest Michigan Planning Commission as a GIS resource. For those who don't know, including me, GIS, what is it?
It's an acronym for Geographic Information Systems.
Okay.
And really it's high-level digital mapping that, one example would be, you take the census, which is basically tables of data, right? And you can put that tabular data into the background of this software, and the software will help. Well, then you add intelligence to it. What's known as geocode the data. So you give it geographic definition.
Okay.
And you can go from tabular into mapped data. So then you can take a table, and then you can take the map that the GIS then creates, and you can then locate the information on a map, which means everything.
Okay.
It's huge.
Yeah, mapping out information. In one moment, we'll be right back. We're talking with John Egelhaaf with the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. Back in a sec on WSJM.
Down to 65, and then for Thursday, a mix of the sun and clouds. Still temperatures in the low 80s with a chance of rain. I'm Chief Meteorologist Carrie Peugeot.
The Morning Show with Ken Lundberg on WSJM.
7:48, it's the WSJM Morning Show. We're having a great conversation with John Egelhaaf. He's the Executive Director of the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. And I don't want to stop us, but I'm going to tell you this is part of our Moody on the Market update this hour, which is brought to you by Insurance Management Service. Call IMS today, your local auto owner's insurance agency in St. Joseph and in Niles. We've been talking about materials management, ethical AI policy, trail development, the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission as a GIS resource. That's where we were this moment. You're helping turn tables of data into maps, and then what do you do with it?
Yeah, I think historically people weren't quite so map driven.
Yeah.
But think about what you do on your phone now and how often you refer to your phone for maps.
All the time.
All the time, right? So that's almost like part of the literature of our lives.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the case before. But GIS is the sort of bridge that takes that kind of useful information, turns it into something geographic, and then you can use that geography for all kinds of great purposes.
Yeah. What else do you want to roll through here?
Let's see. We talked a bit about roads, and believe me, our engagement and involvement in the way that roads are designed and built in the region is extensive. So let's just probably leave it at that. It's more detailed. And in fact, it's sort of built into federal and state legislation that we be involved in that. They want a planning organization to help the communities through the various, let's say, benchmarks that lead to road construction. And we are that entity that does a lot of that facilitation.
I still think you're a subject matter expert.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
I'll take that.
Economic development, you have a role there.
Yeah, we do. The U.S. Department of Commerce, the subdivision of the Department of Commerce that is the Economic Development Administration. We are a district, I'm putting air quotes there. We are a district of the EDA. So the feds build the EDA to fund major economic development infrastructure projects. They rely on us, the EDA does, to be their boots on the ground, to listen to communities, to say, communities want to accomplish the following things, but they don't have enough water supply. Their sewer system isn't able to handle what this new development would be.
Right.
Then you connect that community with the EDA. We typically help the communities through a grant application process with the EDA. And then, then it's, up to the EDA to decide whether they get funded or not. But those are major projects of, $750,000 and above.
Okay. So we've talked about roads, broadband, Spark, master planning, recreation planning, Ox Creek, harbor visioning, coastal solutions compendium committee, and then the budget that you have to do all this work. Let's talk about broadband for a moment, if we can. You're very engaged in broadband expansion. How and why?
Let's see. The why is easy because we've been involved in broadband for easily the last 10 years.
Okay.
We were involved in recognizing that there were gaps in broadband coverage right at the beginning of that 10-year start, and tried to get, we did get a lot of folks involved to say, let's try to understand the way broadband coverage works in the region, where the gaps are, all that kind of stuff. We did that for a while, and there was simply no funding for it. We were, like I talked about before, we were trying to be out on the horizon. We're looking beyond the windshield, off into the horizon, trying to understand what we need to care about for the community's sake. Broadband, the funding just wasn't there. And then then prior to COVID, it became more and more evident to me that we needed to care about this again and make a big deal out of it. So, where do I make this long story short? The idea was I was building our collective intelligence at the SWMPC on broadband, how it's built, what aspects we needed to care about, who's doing great things with broadband. So I would have people come in and sit down and meet with them over the course of months, and then it turned into years. Before you knew it, the Berrien County commissioners were among the 3 counties that they put broadband into their strategic plan and said, we think this is a big enough priority. We should be pushing on broadband.
Yeah.
2 of the Berrien County commissioners joined my effort to build intelligence. We had a little committee that eventually grew and grew. And before you knew it, it became a subcommittee of Berrien County government. And it is now the Broadband Internet Task Force. We've done some amazing work through that to get funding to build fiber across the county and to be involved in the subsequent waves of broadband infrastructure funding that have come since then. I am in various ways involved in Van Buren and Cass County's broadband work, but they have taken different routes, and I've honored that. But yeah, it's been an amazing journey
on broadband, because you're basically connecting people to the information highway, whether they need it for work or play or whatever, to be productive, to lure people to Southwest Michigan. you need to make sure that, I mean, this is a foundational, this is poker stakes right here.
It has
table
turned
stakes
into that, right? But in the beginning,
it wasn't.
Was just for people having fun and streaming video, right?
Yeah.
That's what a lot of leaders thought.
What's next on broadband?
It's a little hard to tell right now with the change in administration. There were very clear priorities leading up to this change, where it was very fiber centric, and it was. And when we talk about broadband, we're talking about high-speed internet.
Right.
Here. So there's various kinds of internet. And if you're on your phone, we're not really necessarily talking about broadband. But if you're on a tablet or in your home computer or your office computer, and you need high speeds that are sort of like maybe at the gig symmetric level, which is pretty fast, you probably need fiber. Yeah. And so that was really the push. It's basically future-proof technology. It lasts forever, almost forever as an infrastructure. You don't have to necessarily, it doesn't corrode or whatever. But this administration has changed course on this one. So we're watching to see how that change is going to impact the next infusion of investment in infrastructure. It could be lower satellite is a much more of a thing, and fiber is less of a thing. We'll just have to see how that goes. Yeah,
I'm not thrilled about the satellite prospect. I haven't seen the technology that makes sense yet.
And it's a lot less future-proof.
Right.
I mean, eventually those satellites have to come down and have to be, and software has to be regenerated and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, pretty cool when the satellites come down, though. You get to see the streak in the sky, and maybe it lands on a house or something like that.
Everybody loves it.
well, we're just kidding. We'll be that's our Moody on the Market update this morning. It's brought to you by Insurance Management Service. Call IMS today, your local auto owners insurance agency in St. Joseph and Niles. Back with John Egelhaaf to wrap up the conversation. He's the executive director at the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. That's coming up in just a moment on WSJM.
Insurance Management Service, your local auto owners insurance agency in St. Joseph and Niles.
Okay, back on the video live stream. And while we've got a couple of messages I have to get to, Bavaria, you went on vacation recently. I was going to ask, I ask a lot of people, what do you do for fun? It sounds like you had a lot of fun. Where'd you go? What'd you do?
Yeah, we were going to go to Newfoundland, and we changed course kind of just a couple of weeks before.
You were going to go to Newfoundland?
Yeah, that was my objective.
Okay.
My wife and I. Well, we changed course, and we decided to go to Bavaria instead. So we went to we flew into Munich, and we didn't overcook the vacation. We just there were 3 other destinations besides Munich. We went alpine. So we went to the tallest peak, the tallest German alpine peak called Zugspitze. That was amazing.
Of course it is.
And the community that is in is called Garmisch-Partenkirchen, and it was the site of the 1936 Winter Olympics. So there's a ski jump still there.
Wow.
That's totally amazing. Absolutely gorgeous. Went to Freiburg, a city of Freiburg, which is really lovely, and spent a couple of days there. Went to a spa town called Baden-Baden, and went to a German spa and spent basically almost 3 hours in a spa.
Oh, how nice.
Pretty incredible.
Oh, man.
And
Baden-Baden.
Yes, there's a lot of Bad towns in Germany, and it doesn't mean bad, it means bath.
Okay.
And I can do a little German, so we're pretty fun.
Did you get on the Autobahn while you were out there?
No, we never rented a car. We were all on public transit and trains and stuff the whole time.
Okay.
It was great.
Love it. We've got only a minute and a half before we wrap up here. We'll be back on the radio in just a moment. But biggest frustration in your role?
Let's see. Biggest frustration. I would say it's a pretty recent one. We had some very amazing community changing grants that were terminated.
Talking about Benton Harbor.
Yeah, there's two different grants. That one was a broadband grant, and that wasn't just Benton Harbor.
Okay.
And then the other one was a Benton Harbor grant.
How much was the broadband grant?
The broadband one was $846,000 over the course of 3 years.
Okay. Back in just a moment here on the WSJM Morning Show.
At Moody Studios, this is WSJM FM Benton Harbor, St. Joseph, a product of Midwest Family Marketing and Media. Proudly serving our community. The Morning Show with Ken and Friends on 94.9 WSJM.
Well, we're just before 8 o'clock, and John, you were right. We ran out of time. John Egelhaaf is the executive director of the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. Thank you so much for joining us. Final words, 10 seconds, 15 seconds or less.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me. And I'm honored to be on the airwaves. So thank you for that. And hey, visit Bavaria. People keep looking at me with their eyes all weird, like, Bavaria, why'd you do that?
What'd you do that?
It's a great destination.
If you're wondering why we're talking about Bavaria, you've got to watch the video live stream. So thank you for that tease. It's on the video live stream. And also, we want to just thank you again for coming in and doing all the work that you and the others do at the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
It's 8 o'clock.
From ABC News, I'm Sherry Preston. As downtown Los Angeles remains under